Now, a lot of things happening in the country, a lot of people beginning to get stressed and anxious because they know something isn't right, and they should trust their instinct because something certainly isn't right. And one of the things that UK Column has been saying to our audience for some time now is if you can't understand the policies unfolding, try viewing them through the lens that we are being attacked by our own government. And certainly that theme very much applies to today's news and reports. Now, we're going to be having a look straight away at chaos unfolding in the country, and chaos basically promoted as part of culture. We're also going to be looking at the very hot topic of immigration. After our UK Column ad break, we're going to be getting on to positive things, but still serious. We're going to be having a look at former Tory MP Andrew Bridgen, who was speaking locally in Totnes. He had some incredible things to say. And we're going to end on the positive side of culture, because a lot of people saying it's getting really difficult to absorb the terrible things that are unfolding in the UK. But we make no apologies for reporting the difficult things, because if you want to deal with what's happening, you have to understand it. You cannot fight what you don't see and you can't understand. Ben, let's bring you in straight away. Just incredible report that you have here, and people really need to understand the significance of what took place in London.
Indeed. I mean, London town, summer in the city, and things are heating up. They're getting pretty crazy. Brian just talked about the cultural attack that we're under. We talk a lot about politics and economics and culture, the three pillars of our society. And we talk a lot about the politicians, talk a lot about the business people, industry. And today we're going to look at culture, because this weekend I've been exposed to a really bizarre mix of nihilistic hedonism, pagan ritual, Christian heresy, psychological operations, Masonic symbolism, managed descent into madness, and the breakdown of our national identity so it can ultimately be reshaped into something new. This is the chaos side of the order out of chaos equation, and events were focused around the National Gallery in central London on Trafalgar Square and the celebrations of its 200th anniversary, the NG 200 event. Been going for a couple of years, and a whole program has been taking place all around the country. And this was the crescendo of that entire process. Huge, significant cultural event for the gallery, for London, for the art world, and obviously celebrating an institution that has works of art from the likes of Holbein, Van Gogh, Turner, Da Vinci, Titian, Botticelli, Van Eyck. We had to bring in this guy to curate the proceedings. This is postmodern trickster Jeremy Deller, that guy on the right with that's Rod Stewart, isn't it?
Yes.
Like the good pals. And Deller is a bit of an enfant terrible in the modern art world. Does a lot of conceptual stuff. As I said, postmodern trickery. Not a lot of craft to it, to be honest with you. A lot of concept and a lot of very kind of strong, simplistic messaging that kind of descends into propaganda, to be honest with you. So you arrived at the square. This was happening on Saturday afternoon. Well, started at 11 a.m. through to 5. Big public event, free to attend. All about freedom to party. We want to dance, it says on the right-hand side there. You can't quite read it, but it does say a future without fear, which is a message that I very much resonate with, actually. You know, strong, simple, but I think deceptively upbeat. Also, you'll notice that all of this is delivered in this kind of traditional style. So you have these banners that are inspired by the traditional union banners. So you'd see like the TUC marching with these, for example, and you can look back through, you know, the 1800s and the 1900s, and you can see examples of these being produced and taken on marches. So there's very much a socialist, left-wing political dynamic to this as well. And this essentially is the art world trying to own that space. That's what they're doing here. And I'll come back to that in a moment. It's very important, actually, because it links into Fabianism and all these kind of political movements that begin to overlap very closely with the cultural world. Let's have a look at, I guess, some art. You can call this art. And interestingly, it originates in Plymouth. So this is Beryl, the inflatable woman who was carried across Plymouth Hoe by a bunch of people from a local weightlifting gym. And that was last year, I think it was. And then she ended up tethered down in one of the fountains on Trafalgar Square on the weekend. And then she went on to become part of the parade leading out the Triumph of Art, which, if I haven't already said, that was the name of the exhibition. Yeah? And we'll come back to the parade in a minute. I've got some footage of that. And there's, as we said, there's a lot of talk of chaos, right? It's a very chaotic event in a number of ways, not in terms of how it was run. Yeah, it was being run very, very, very tightly, well managed, but it was deliberately chaotic. The people working there, a lot of the people working there were wearing these T-shirts. You can see it says "Good Chaos." Yeah, good chaos, and do your own thing, which is venturing into "do as thou wilt" for me. That's what this reads like. This was coming from a charity, actually. So there's a big overlap here with the charitable sector. This organisation called Good Vibes Only. Bad vibes? No thanks. It's all about good vibes. It's all about good chaos. But what does good mean? And what's chaos mean? And where's this all heading to? I'm not sure. And also, there was a lot of fun, but ultimately a lot of talk of losing your mind. Let's have a listen to this.
Hey, you! You're losing your mind. Hey, you! You're losing your
So, quite hedonistic, quite raucous, chaotic, fun, but also, I think, slightly sinister. Why are we being told that we're losing our minds over and over and over and over again in the middle of Trafalgar Square? And that track was repeated several times through the day. You're losing your mind. Is that what people are supposed to take away from this? I think that's what it was. And actually, I'm reminded, if you go and read about this thing called Project Artichoke, it was a precursor to the MK Ultra program. It was about mind control, ultimately. And this feels like a propaganda exercise. I think we have to understand it like a propaganda exercise. And if you're losing your mind, you are descending into chaos. I think that's what they're trying to propagate here, very clearly. I'll come back to that point. A lot of Christian heresy. I think that's what it is, to be quite honest with you. There was this tent, also on the Trafalgar Square, where you could go and see Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden. You can see the sign there, again, in that kind of traditional style. And you can see an arrow pointing to the right with a serpent entwined around it. Is that progress? Are we moving forwards with that arrow? Is that what that is? And when you went in, you weren't actually allowed to take photos, but I did go through, and you will see Adam and Eve, who did appear and go on the parade. And again, you'll see that a little bit later in the video. But when I walked through, they were both in there very happily munching away on apples from the Tree of Life. They were greedily gobbling down apples, greedily gobbling down knowledge from the Tree of Life. You know, some pretty strong messaging coming through there, right? You know, this in embrace of the satanic, ultimately, this huge, important cultural event in the centre of London. Right next to that, on the fourth plinth, was this sculpture by a lady called Teresa Margolis, who is a Jewish Mexican artist. This was reported. This is a temporary sculpture. They go up for a period of, I think it's a year or 2 years. So they just kind of rotate through different pieces of artwork. But I don't think for a second that this was here coincidentally. I think this was supposed to be a focal point. So this was about, according to The Guardian, putting 726 trans lives on the fourth plinth. Right, so you can see her there. That's the sculptor, a former forensic pathologist who has a studio attached to a morgue in Mexico City, who uses fluids from corpses to make art. Apparently, this project was inspired by a Mesoamerican tradition where they would use racks to display the skulls of sacrifice victims or prisoners of war. Again, this is right in the centre of London. It's there right now, and it's right at the centre of this focal point event, cultural event, where we're being told that we're losing our minds and everything is descending into chaos. Lots of socialist politics. William Morris was next to Adam and Eve. William Morris, he's there on the left. There was another sign. I didn't get a picture of it, unfortunately. But he was a great Victorian bloke, Londoner, writer, socialist. You can see on the right-hand side there were a bunch of his pamphlets here, Monopoly or How Labour is Robbed for the Hammersmith Socialist Society. And this is slap bang in the middle of the Fabian era. Yeah, so he wasn't a member of the Fabian Society, but he did work closely with some of the founder members. So George Bernard Shaw, for example, and William Morris were very close with each other. So that ties this all back into the dominant political movement that's running the country right now. You know, and the idea that these things are disconnected from each other, I think, is incredibly naive. What are they driving towards? They're driving towards a new form, new system of global governance. They're driving a transformation of humanity. They've been very clear about that. They're engaged in a process of transing us, transhumanism. I think that the sculpture that we just talked about speaks to that very, very clearly. But they also want to completely change the technology that we use to run our society. So this was also there at the event in the northeast corner. This was the Centre for Alternative Technology. And of course, this is all tied into the climate agenda. So they talked about zero carbon Britain, throwing new ideas into the mix, trying out new things. But actually what I saw people doing was smashing up old clay with sticks. It didn't look like new technology. It looked like old technology. It felt regressive. It felt like we were being dragged back into something primitive, actually. And that was the sense I was getting from a lot of this. A lot of these kind of paganistic rituals and symbols that were coming through were felt pre-Christian, pre-Christ, anti-Christ, actually, even in a way. Now, where's this coming from? So, of course, the UN are in the mix. So that organisation, the Centre for Alternative Technology in Wales, allows group visits to the UNESCO biosphere, UNESCO Diffie biosphere in mid-Wales. So you've got UN absolutely involved in this as well. So this is a full economic, cultural, political program tied up into a huge psychological operation and propaganda exercise in the centre of London, backed by the state, the Arts Council, but also Lord Sainsbury, Len Blavatnik, philanthropic wealth, corporations like Marks and Spencer are in the background funding the National Gallery as well. And, this was quite an astonishing thing to see. And it all culminated in this parade, which we've got a short clip of now. spend all day analysing that. I mean, it didn't feel like a country that I recognised. I don't know. Brian, what do you think?
Well, the whole topic, Ben, extremely disturbing. It certainly isn't nonsense because this is calculated policy. And of course, we've got full government support through the Minister of Culture. This is public money being used for this stuff. And it's clearly an attack on people's minds. And it's also certainly an attack on Christianity. So this is something very, very dark coming out of the heart of the state. And of course, the minds they're really after are the minds of children.
Completely agree. I completely agree. I've got another video. I'm just going to skip over that, though, actually, just in the interest of time. Maybe we can show that later on. But I wanted to just give you a quick overview, right? Because then something interesting happened in the afternoon. So here we've got the view of Trafalgar Square. This is the map. So you can see, well, you can actually... been cut off slightly in the top left-hand corner, but the losing your mind bit was on the steps in the centre. The fourth plinth with the transgender sculpture in the top left, next to Adam and Eve, William Morris there, the alternative technology systems, Beryl the inflatable, the good chaos people around Nelson's column. I did wonder what Nelson would have thought of all of this while I was there, to be honest with you. And then in the afternoon, completely unexpected, certainly by me, but I don't think this was uncalculated in any way. This would certainly have been part of the entire program. Transgender Pride comes in, and it actually starts in the southwest corner of Trafalgar Square. So you've had the 3 or 4 hours of these new ideas swilling around in the square, the chaos and the madness and the do as thou wilt, and these ideas that then get subsumed into the Trans Pride parade, which kicked off. That's me just outside the Admiralty in the southwest corner. You can see the parade starting off, and it was very well attended. Once they started moving, they were going past for a good half hour, 40 minutes, something like that. There was a lot of people out on the street. Lots to be said about that. It's a very complicated issue, and Brian and I are going to talk about that more over the next week or two. But one thing that jumped out at me from this, I thought was quite sinister. You can see this is always presented in the context of empathy and kindness. And you can see on the left there, the sign says, trans lives are more important than cis feelings. And the lady holding that up is in the right-hand side of the frame. And she was wearing a T-shirt which says on it, which blow that up for you, kill everyone now, condone first-degree murder, advocate cannibalism, eat SH1T, filth is my politics, filth is my life. Now that's a quote from a film called Pink Flamingos by John Waters, came out in 1972. But that was really striking to me when I saw that online earlier on. You know, what is this all about? Because that doesn't sound like empathy and kindness to me. Also, a couple more things. Real witches don't support transphobes. So apparently real witches are pro-trans. What else are real witches doing? Who are these witches? It's not the first time I've heard talk of witchcraft in London over the past week, to be quite frank with you. Something going on here. What else is happening? This is the view down Whitehall from Trafalgar Square. 3 Ukraine flags, 2 Union Jacks. Is there a pecking order here? Are we an occupied country? Are all of these things connected? I don't know. Quick timeline cleanse. I headed back into the National Gallery to get a bit of sense. The Pistoia Santa Trinita altarpiece on the left there, Francesco Pesellino, 1435, and then Raphael's Mond Crucifixion, 1530 on the right. That's more like it.
Ben, thank you very much. Well, our audience clearly picking up how serious this is. And of course, this culture has not come out of nowhere. It hasn't just sort of manifested. This is created with the backing of enormous amounts of public money through the government itself. And many people saying, I just can't believe what the UK column is reporting today because this is Satanism. Well, many people might agree with you, but one thing we can be sure of, this culture is being implanted on the population of UK whether we want it or not at the moment, until people stand up to be counted. And of course, this is immensely dangerous, an immensely dangerous attack on the minds of our